Hi everybody. If everybody wants to take a seat, we're going to get started with Hollywood WordPress. Feel free to stock up on snacks and things. Grab some water right now if you want to. So first of all, I just want to say happy holidays to everybody. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome to Hollywood WordPress. For anybody that's new, this is a monthly meetup where we get together here in Hollywood and we discuss all things WordPress and other topics that are related to WordPress. Sometimes we'll talk about freelance, consulting, we'll talk about marketing, we'll just talk about things that are related to or things that you can achieve using WordPress. This is one amongst many cool meetups in the Los Angeles area. I think we're up to about 20 meetups in the entire Southern California, from like San Diego to LA. So if you live in another part of LA and you're looking for other meetups, you can just go on meetup.com and look for your area, and there may be another one closer to where you live. But most people that I'm seeing here, it's like people have been here before. How many people have been here to Hollywood WordPress before? Yeah, pretty much almost everybody. Okay, so this is a cool meetup group, and it's probably the best one. So, if you're new, one thing I'd like to do is, if anybody has freelance opportunities or consulting opportunities, we like to use this meetup group as a way for people to connect. If they have freelancing opportunities, to extend that out to other people in the community that might be looking for them. So is there anybody that wants to make an announcement for a freelance opportunity that they have for someone else? Okay, well, just know that this is the type of place where you can connect with people. If you're looking for working partners, if you're looking for someone to outsource to, or you have a project, just hanging around here after the meetup and getting to know people is a great way to make those connections. I want to take a moment to give a quick thanks to WeWork for allowing us to hold our meetup here. This is a great location. We're always grateful. They have a really cool deal that they've extended to members of our meetup group. If you guys are looking for a really cool co-working spot and you're open to WeWork, see me afterwards and I'll connect you with the right person that you can get a really cool discount on either one of these hot desks back there, or they have other solutions and other options too. Second sponsor I'd like to thank is SiteGround. They offer some really cool WordPress hosting. So if you are looking to host your WordPress websites on a really great host, I use SiteGround. They're awesome. They give great service. They understand WordPress really well and all the concerns that go into hosting WordPress. And they provided some swag for us back here on this table back here. So, you know, it's that time of year where, you know, we all get gifts. You get given gifts, and one of those gifts oftentimes is socks. So just know that there are SiteGround socks back here. I mean, I've got several pair, okay? What's that? And I'm wearing them. No, I'm not. No. These are the Nike. These are the, you wear them to the gym socks. Okay. What else is going on? What other sponsors? Oh, our third sponsor I want to mention, who is maybe the best sponsor of all the sponsors we have, is this little company by the name of Art Control. They are providing the headphones that we're going to win tonight. And it's run by just some really good people, so just know that. So we're going to get started. We're going to crack into it pretty quick here. I'd like to bring up our first speaker of the evening. Now, if you've not met Roy Sivan yet, You probably should. He is a developer in the WordPress community. He has DIY'd his way into the position he's in now. He is what you would say is an artisan developer. He's taken his craft very seriously from early iterations when he first got into WordPress. He's worked in several agency models. One of them, Sideplex, the place that we used to hold this meetup group at way back in the day. And he's transitioned several times. He now works for Disney as a WordPress developer for Disney. So he's going to be sharing some of his experience or some of his insight on how you transition from being like a practitioner or just a normal WordPress user to taking the dev side of WordPress very seriously. And so without further ado, Roy, I want to bring you up right now. So let's welcome him.
How's it going? All right, so as Greg said, I'm going to be talking about kind of like my journey as a developer and then try to share some wisdom that I've gotten through the years. And, you know, if you want to take the same path, then it's always good to learn from someone who's already taken it. If you guys came last month, Greg gave a great talk about becoming a designer artisan. So the term artisan, we'll get into it a little bit more, but really it's our way of saying you're kind of your really top level people that really take what they do seriously. They think outside of their own box. They look outside. They take a lot of it into consideration. Artisans really care about the products that they put out there. So be warned. I am going to share you, or not going to shield you from the truth. I was talking at WordCamp Toronto a couple weeks ago, last month, and I actually said something that was not with the grain of WordPress core developers, and all the lights shut off on me while I was talking. So I'm not afraid to tell you what I feel and what maybe the development community outside of WordPress feels. So be warned, if you have any heart conditions to WordPress, you might want to leave. So who am I? I'm a WordPress developer, currently work at Disney. I'm also the co-founder of Art Control. Art Control develops plugins and web-based applications that really help designers and developers connect, get together, and helps freelancers and consultants do their job even better, more efficiently. We create plugins and going to be creating more plugins that help them do their job better. I do tend to talk pretty fast, so stop me at any point with questions. I don't mind this being more of a conversation than it is me talking to you. But if you need me to repeat something, just yell and I will stop. So, start at the beginning. What is an artisan? An artisan defined is a worker in a skilled trade, especially one that involves making things by hand. Based on that definition, does anyone here feel like they're an artisan? I mean, you guys are all building stuff with your hands, right? I mean, you're on a computer, you're using your hands, you're creating a product for someone. So what really separates you from, let's say, a blacksmith or something like that? Yes, it's not a physical product, but you're still slaving away those hours, you're still working really hard, and you're creating something. You're creating a masterpiece. And everything you create should be a masterpiece. You should be proud of everything you do. So how does that really relate to WordPress? Well, a WordPress developer artisan, or a WordPress artisan developer, takes things to the next level. They tend to build things from scratch instead of looking at plugins and solutions like that. They tend to think outside of the box. WordPress developer or artisan developers tend to also think about the design a little bit more than your typical developer. They're the ones that are like, well, this is designed this way. How can I challenge myself to actually build it that way? Not telling the designer they can't design something because that's not how their code is set up. Yes, there's some back and forth there, and I might get some developer hate for that, but developers that are really developing for really what it is they love will find ways around to, at least compromise a solution. Sometimes, I'll get a designer who shoots me a design and I'm like, I can't do this with my Bootstrap framework. This is impossible. So I'll work with them and I'll find some middle ground, something that I can kind of put together that meets what they want and meets my code kind of guideline. Before you start taking notes and I get more into my whole spiel, ask yourself, do you want to be an artisan? My path started as a little kid. I was actually just talking to someone today about Legos. I grew up around Legos, Connects, Tinker Toys, and as I grew older, I started playing around with batteries and electric wires and light bulbs and seeing how I can make light bulbs turn on with batteries and all sorts of stuff like that. I would take apart remote controls and put them back together. That's not everybody. Some people just like the remote control and accept it for what it is, and they'll go sell that remote control to someone else and say, hey, it works. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to diss anyone that basically puts together a solution and sells it. I have no qualms with that area of life. People make a great living doing that. But I want to talk about people who really want to up their game, who say, hey, this plugin works, but it doesn't work exactly like I want it to, or it's buggy, or it does something, and I want to learn what makes this thing tick so I can figure out how to fix it myself or make something even better. I know probably everyone in this room has picked up a plugin and is just like, well, this says it works this way, but it obviously doesn't. So how can I make that work that way? What are you going to do? Hire someone to make it work? You're going to maybe install another plugin that doesn't work, that doesn't, has conflicts, and somehow you're going to piece together something. Well, an artisan is someone who really wants to take it to the next level and really wants to take it apart, rip it apart, figure out what's going on, and then start all over again. So again, it's really important you ask yourself this, because if you're happy with where you're at, that's key. I mean, if I was happy where I was at when I first started in internet, which was SEO guy, I probably would still be an SEO guy. I hate SEO. I can't stand SEO. I'm happy I'm a developer. So just stick to where you're happy. All right, one of my top rules for leveling yourself up. Tools. A good artisan has the best tools to match their workflow. It's not about necessarily the best tools or the most top-rated tools. It's about how do you get to what you want the most efficiently, and which tools make you even more efficient. So I'll give you an example. When I first started coding, I think it was Macromedia Dreamweaver was the only thing I really knew back then. So I would plop like a table down using the visual editor, and I would see a table. I mean, that was all there was back then, tables, so that's all I saw. That's how I learned HTML, is I was just throwing stuff into tables and saw all these tables compounded on top of tables with some background colors for effect. I used Macromedia Dreamweaver all through high school and even really into early college. And then someone said, hey, have you tried Coda? I was like, no, what's Coda? They're like, well, they're the same people that make Transmit, which was an FTP client I used. And they're like, check it out. So I did. And Coda was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I love Coda. I now have Coda too. There are other great IDEs out there for you to code on. My workflow just really works well with Coda, so that's what I use. Sublime from time to time if I need to, but I love Coda because it really integrates well with Git, subversioning, FTP. It does everything I need it to, so I like it. It makes my workflow very efficient. On top of finding these tools, pay for them. So when I was in middle school, high school, I would pirate everything I could. I mean, I didn't want to pay a dime for anything. And that really, it got me to the next level. It made me think, well, if I'm going to work 5 hours faster because I have Coda and I paid $100 for it, if I can charge eventually, make up that money from my clientele, isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth it to have that peace of mind that I've got this thing, it works well, I can update it when it needs to? Totally worth it. I'm going to tack on to programs because we're talking about WordPress here. Plugins. Plugins are a big thing of what we do. When I first started with WordPress, I started using a Contact Form 7, which was the big contact form builder back in the day. And then Gravity Forms came out. And I was like, why would I pay $100 for Gravity Forms? It's just a form builder. I can do this myself. I honestly use Gravity Forms more than I like to admit nowadays because I just use it for everything. I will create whole large-scale websites just built around Gravity Forms because it's not just a great form builder, it has a great development side to it. So overall, it's a great package, and for $100 for unlimited sites for I think a year or two, totally worth it. So Gravity Forms is definitely high on my list of things I recommend. ServerPress was something I actually just got into at Disney because I never used it before, or a desktop server. For people that are just creating WordPress sites spinning them up, putting them online for their clients, it's a great, great tool. I'm used to MAMP, which is more of a full-on server, localized server, which allows me more than just WordPress. But if all you're doing is WordPress, I'd say desktop server, ServerPress, great, great tool. So with the tools that you have comes your code. I'm going to say step out of your comfort zone. Challenge yourself to code something that you don't know. And this is kind of a big thing, because how do you know how to code something if you don't know how to code it? Well, you learn. So something an artisan does, I would say, something that's kind of part of our traits, is we want to take whatever it is we see and we want to take it apart and learn how it was built. Every time I see a cool snippet of CSS or JavaScript or jQuery, I'm like, that's awesome. How did they do that? How can I make it better? That's like the first two questions that come to my head. How do they code it? How can I make it even better? So if you are doing CSS right now, you're kind of like dabbling with the editor in your WordPress backend, you're kind of changing colors around, step outside of that box. Try doing some HTML. Do some JavaScript. You don't have to do it right, just start doing it. And you'll start seeing things that you didn't think you could do before, and you'll slowly get there. I mean, it's not an overnight process. It's not you're going to go from not knowing JavaScript to being a super JavaScript developer tomorrow. But you might learn how to hide something with jQuery. You might learn how to fade something in very slowly. That's just a starting step. So take small steps, but get out of your comfort zone. Another big thing I have, stop using Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a great tool when you know what you're looking at, but it's a horrible tool when you don't. Because if you type in Google, hey, I need to do X, right? And Stack Overflow is like, hey, I just figured out how to do X. Here's a code block. If you don't know any of that code, how do you know that's good code? How do you know that's not going to mess something else up on your site? How do you know that's not going to ruin something or kill the server or whatever? So stop pasting huge chunks of code and start learning, really diving into what it is you need. I'd say start thinking more on the micro level. So I would say if you have a problem and you need to get to a point, think about all the steps that you need to take to get there. So I'm going to give you an example. You need a slider. Basic slideshow, images come, fade in, fade out. So what code do you really need? You need HTML for all the images. You need JavaScript, right? And within that JavaScript, you need JavaScript that both detects how many images there are and then basically fades one into another. So instead of searching on Stack Overflow, hey, how do I make a sliding, fading slider thing? Start asking, how do I use JavaScript to fade an image in? How do I use JavaScript to fade an image out? Leads me to my next thing, GoogleFu. Before you Google, think about it. Think about the whole problem and start cutting it up. As I said, sometimes you'll figure out much easier that there's little things that you can fix instead of these huge code snippets. And as you learn these little tiny things, you'll eventually learn the whole thing. So you'll learn maybe how to input, how to put an HTML image tag in, right? So now you know how to do that. So next time that comes up, you're like, hey, I remember how to do this. I'll do this again for this time. Hey, I know how to make an image fade out. I know how to do that now. So you take these micro level Google searches and you're drilling down and you actually end up learning because you're doing it. Copy pasting is not horrible. I call it code regurgitation. And it's how I learned how to code too. Like when I first picked up WordPress and other things, I would always copy paste code. I think it took me an embarrassing amount of time to get to the point where I knew how to write a WP query without looking it up. Even not the WP query, but like if have post, while have post, which is a pretty basic thing which you're going to see on every single template page. But I think for a good like 3 years or 5 years even, I was just like, I don't want to write this, let me just Google it. And I would just copy paste it from somewhere. And eventually I was like, well, why don't I challenge myself here? Why don't I figure out how to code this thing or write this essentially one line of code without looking it up every single time? Because I'm actually wasting time Googling it, copying it, coming back, pasting it. That's what I mean. Start drilling down. Another example, instead of Googling how to use JavaScript file in WordPress theme, you'll eventually learn that to really get a JavaScript file in a WordPress theme and use it, the correct way is using WP and Q script. So I still Google WP and Q script from time to time because there's a lot of parameters to it that sometimes I need to know. But for the most part, you'll see that transition. You'll actually notice it within yourself that you're kind of going from these vague, very vague phrases, and you're going to start Google searching for actual like code functions and code snippets. And then you're going to have those bookmarked, and then you're going to have those memorized. So it really is a progression, but I'd say always challenge yourself to stop before you Google, think about all the steps, and microanalyze it. Yeah. So next slide is going to be a shocker. If you want to be a good WordPress developer, stop using WordPress. So you can learn a lot by just taking a few steps out of the WordPress community and developing in something out. I know this sounds like blasphemy, and I'm expecting the lights to turn off again, but really you'll learn a lot. So what can I learn? It wasn't until I stepped out of the WordPress community or stopped developing WordPress full-time that I understand that there was a difference between front-end coding and back-end coding. When you're a theme developer and you're developing out themes like CSS, you end up doing PHP. And in most other like worlds, even at Disney's sometimes, but more so like when you're dealing with other frameworks, you'll see that someone who's doing front-end coding, someone that's doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, won't really have to touch too much PHP at all. Same with the other way around. If you are a back-end coder, you tend to do a lot of PHP, you end up doing a lot of the server stuff, you don't end up doing that much HTML and CSS. It leads me to the MVC architecture. So MVC architecture is something that WordPress does not employ. It is not an MVC framework. But you'll learn that other frameworks are, and the way that they work sometimes is a little more logical than for the build. So you end up thinking, well, great, I have this MVC architecture framework, and I have WordPress. Now, if you spend enough time, you can offer your client two different things. Do they really need WordPress? Is it a simple enough site? Or are they coming to you with this big build solution that you're like, well, MVC is probably the way to go. You might learn new PHP frameworks altogether. So getting out of WordPress, there's things like Laravel, Symfony, PHP Falcon, I think is what it's called, is the new up-and-coming one, Cake PHP. There's a whole bunch of them. They're all MVC-based. They're all syntaxed differently. They're all PHP, though. You might move away from PHP altogether. I spent a lot of my time learning JavaScript, and I actually moved away from the LAMP stack. So I moved away from MySQL. I moved away from PHP, and I went into what's called the Bean stack, which is a lot of JavaScript and Node.js and a lot of this other more new age coding techniques. So step away from WordPress. You might learn a lot more than you think you will, and sometimes WordPress is a crutch for you. If you're at that point where you're like, well, I can code a WordPress site inside and out for any client that comes to me, but I'm not going to learn anything new, you're being hindered by your own WordPress is hindering you at that point. I will warn you, many devs don't come back to WordPress though. I just read an article from the guy that invented WP CLI, one of the greatest or the only really command line tool for WordPress. Guy who invented it refuses to do any more WordPress work. He basically stepped away from the WordPress community, learned MVC architecture, learned that there's certain things that are built into the core of WordPress that he didn't like, that he thought, well, I can't build a really good application if this is the basis for WordPress. So he said, I've given it to good people, WP CLI is in good hands, I'm out. But if you do come back, it's an amazing thing. So I've come back to the WordPress community, and I've noticed a couple things. People I talk to that have left the WordPress community are the ones that give the best talks at WordCamps. They write the best articles, and they really get you thinking outside of your box. Like, I sat there at WordCamp Toronto with a guy named Carl, and we were sitting at the Happiness Bar for almost the whole 2 days. In that 2 days, I learned more about object-oriented programming than I have in the last year. And it was just me and him sitting there talking, learning. I was bouncing stuff off of him from my for a new plugin that we just released, SG90. And I was talking to him about how I coded it, and he said, well, you know what? It's not coded that right, or you can make this better. And I said, show me. And so I learned all about these new classes and all this new stuff, and I really dived into PHP. I'm not a back-end coder, but it was pretty cool. So these are the kind of people that you're going to have the best conversations out of if you really want to learn more. The people that come back to WordPress after leaving are the ones that really get you thinking, well, what else is out there? How can I make my code better? How can I, serve my clients even more? So last week, Greg touched on the dip, and the dip is actually a very real thing for everybody. For freelancers, the dip might come when you don't have enough clientele and you're pushing to make rent. For designers, it might be a design wall. You just don't know what to design for someone, or, the 50th doctor came to you, and you're like, how am I going to make this different from the other 40 doctors I just developed and designed? So developers have the same dip, and it's when you get to a point where you feel like you're confident in what you're doing, but you want to learn something new. And sometimes you'll have a job that allows you to, pays for your time to learn it, whatever it may be. I find more often than not, you're doing it on your own time. No one's really going to want to pay for you to learn something, especially if it takes a lot of time. So my hint for you is figure out, just like the tools, figure out how to get through it as efficiently as possible. I'm going to tell you about AngularJS. AngularJS is a front-end templating tool and kind of an MVC framework that I use. I build apps on it. It's all JavaScript. I basically got to a point a couple years back where I was, I don't want to say bored with WordPress, but I knew WordPress. I was like, what else is out there? And my friend, who was a really big Angular guy, said, learn Angular. And I'm like, okay, great. But Angular is a front-end tool. I don't have a back-end. There's no data for me to actually put on the screen. It's just code. I'm like, all right, what am I going to do now? How can I make my learning curve as efficient as possible? And I was like, well, I know WordPress inside and out. Why don't I leverage WordPress? So I actually created an Angular theme for WordPress that used all of the WordPress backend. At first, it was a hodgepodge of horrible code. And as I learned Angular more and more, and things like the WP API, the JSON REST API came out, that really helped my learning curve. And today, I can't say I'm an Angular expert, but I can build applications pretty fully and pretty confidently with it. And I can do the same with anything else at this point. I feel like if someone else came up to me and said, hey, I need you to work on this, do you know how to use it? I can be like, no, but give me a couple days. At my last job, I had the same problem come up with Knockout.js. Knockout.js is kind of like Angular. It actually has some of the same design patterns. So I did the same thing. I hooked it up to a WordPress install with the WP API, hooked up the backend, spent a couple hours on their docs, and next thing I knew, I wasn't a Knockout expert, but I knew it enough to get the task done at work. It's super critical. So I'd say try your best. If you have any questions on if you need to brainstorm ways to get through that, look at other people who have gone through it. How did other people learn? Did they go to Lynda? Did they look at tutorials? Did they use Stack Overflow? Did they use the documentation? Figure out what other people have used to go down the same path and try to mimic them and, again, make it more efficient. I'll give you some resources now that I have. Coda 2, I told you, is my IDE. It's my preferred IDE. It's what I code in 99% of the day. It has Git integration for GitHub or any other Git repository, FTP, SFTP, really anything. It's an awesome tool. Sublime Text is another good IDE. Weird issue at work happened to me the other day where I was working on a project, and every time I opened up the file with Coda, Google Chrome would open up a tab and tell me to log in, and I was like, what? So every time I typed in a character, like a space even, another tab would open, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. This is crazy. I eventually opened it up in Terminal, and it didn't do it. So I downloaded Sublime Text. I tested in Sublime Text. It didn't do that. So sometimes Coda 2 isn't the best thing in the world, but I've had really good luck with it so far. Sublime Text is definitely my second favorite IDE. I know PHP Storm is a lot of people's favorite in the PHP community, and there's plenty of other ones. So just find the one that works best for you. GitHub. GitHub is basically your Git repository website. It's a UI for it, UI for Git. If you're not using Git for everything you do, stop and start using it, because it is the best thing that ever happened to coding. You don't need GitHub account actually to do Git. You can actually just download and create a Git repository locally. But for people that are just getting in, go to GitHub, create a repo. It's free to use if it's public, so don't put anything super private on there. But test it out, play around with it. The GitHub app is really easy to use, and next thing you know, if your computer crashes or you put in a piece of code and it crashes the site because you're versioning, you can easily just go backwards. The WP Codex. Everyone should know what the codex is. If not, learn it. It's not, I'd say it's a great documentation for WordPress up to a point. So if you're just getting into the more advanced functionality of WordPress, you want to learn about all the hooks and actions, documentation's all right for that. And I think I have it bookmarked. I have probably at least 10 bookmarks straight to the codex on my computer. Use it. Gravity Forms, as I said earlier, one of the greatest plugins I think WordPress has, well, that's come out for the WordPress platform. Not just is it great for creating your basic contact form, but really any form necessary. And it really does a lot of advanced functionality and allows for a lot of dev on the back end. AWP Facebook group. If you're not part of this Facebook group, get on Facebook, join. It's called AWP. It's Advanced WordPress. It's probably one of the greatest groups I've ever joined. They're actually based in San Diego, and then they kind of grown. So now they're about 10, 12,000 people on there. And basically, it's if you have an advanced question, if you want to ask not something like, how do I install this theme, but hey, this theme is doing this on this error, spitting out this error, that's when you would go to AWP and say, hey, I've looked everywhere, I've Googled it, I don't know what's going on. There's always someone on there that's going to give you an answer. There's usually probably 20 people, and they're going to start arguing about which one's the right answer. But that's what AWP is all about. Sometimes there's funny stuff posted on there. Good group of guys. I'd recommend getting on there. Huh? Yeah. Guys and gals, sorry. If you Google WordPress API list, that is literally the list of all the functionality you can get out of WordPress that you might not know about. So all the hooks, all the filters, all the other plugin stuff that you might not know exist. There's some really cool stuff on there. Sometimes I'm even still finding stuff on there. So go check that out. It's actually just an index that goes to other pages, but you might find an API that you didn't know existed, and you're like, I was looking for this exact thing. Tuts Plus. Tuts Plus is a great tutorial website. There's some really good tutorials on there. Sometimes they're like cut up like 4 hours worth of tutorials, cut up into like little chunks. And they're anything from your beginner stuff all the way to your really advanced stuff. So I've been slowly getting into object-oriented programming and design. And that's on there, but I know that there's like basic theme development as well. It's not just WordPress, it's kind of a mix of stuff. That's it for me. If you have any dev questions, you can always reach me on Twitter. If you want exact help from me or any other developer, check out codingofficehours.com. It's in beta right now, so sorry if it's a little buggy, but it's basically a place you can go and get instant help from any one of the developers I've kind of leveraged to get on there. And all that we ask for in return is a tip. It's not an hourly based service. It's not a minute based service. It's you get on there, you ask a question. If they have time, they'll respond to you, and you tip them whatever you feel is necessary for their amount of time. It's going to be revamped in the next couple months, so get on there now. Look how crappy it is, and then you can appreciate it that much more when it comes out again in 3 months. What's a what? A fair tip, it depends on what they're doing. So, I mean, if you're like, hey, my theme's broken, can you fix everything? Then it's probably a little bit more. But if it's like, hey, I don't know how to enqueue something, and they're like, 2 minutes later, here's how you do it, then, you know. No, it's all on the site. You send a request on the site, they'll respond. If they're online at the time, the site actually also houses a live video chat and text chat with code sharing. So you can send them your code. They'll actually send you a revision of your code back, which you can look at the revisions of. Text chat and video, all on one screen. Screen share, no, because it's not supported. So if you want to do screen share, go to Skype or Google Hangouts or something. But at least you can get a hold of them. We have a pretty good base right now of developers, but we're going to be expanding out pretty soon here. But I'm on there. A lot of the AWP Facebook devs are on there. And it's an awesome place. There's no finite tip amount. I can't say the basic tip is $5, but I'll give you yeah. I'll give you a real world example. Greg came to me. Greg, runner of the WordPress Meetup. Yeah, he came to me and said, "Hey, my site's hosed. What's wrong with it?" And in like 2 minutes, I was like, "Hey, it's this plugin. Why are you using this really old, crappy plugin?" He turned it off, and like, I'm sure his heart rate went from like sky high down to like normal because it was a client's website or something. So it was like really important that his hosed website become back online. So for that, he gave me like $50, and it was totally worth it. So, and it took me probably about 20 minutes of debugging, but that's about it. So really, it's how much of their life did they just save, and how do you value that amount of time? Yeah. Yeah.
Question, do you have, just like from your experience, do you have like a basic install stack of plugins like you're always going to use, you know, like do you have like
UI of plugins or WordPress plugins? WordPress plugins, no. I mean, Gravity Forms is usually my go-to, but I don't keep it installed all the time. Like, I don't always need it. Again, I'm at a point where if someone says, "Hey, I need to do something," I'm usually not going to look for a plugin the first thing in my mind. I'm going to be like, "How am I going to build this?" So I don't really have a base plugins, but I know a lot of people like, you know, having the SEO plugin, the Yoast SEO plugin. I know a lot of people like having a contact form plugin, so if that's Gravity Forms, and a caching plugin usually. So like W3 Total Cache or WP Super Cache. Those are usually the three that I think most people use the most. And then from there, it just depends on the build. Any other questions? Yeah. I've used Qform in the past, but I find it on the developer end. So like if you want to do logic to the data after someone's submitted, it's not nearly as easy as Gravity Forms. So if you have a lot of high logic form building, even if you have one site that has a big high logic form, the $100 is totally worth it because there's so much you can do with Gravity Forms. Yes, they have basically the API that you tie into, like it's basically all hooks, right? So just like WordPress hooks, Gravity Forms has their own, but the Gravity Forms builder, like the UI part of it on the back end, super easy to use. They're extendable, so people can actually create third-party form elements. So if you need for example, I downloaded a plugin once that created a custom post type, right? So the form would actually create a custom post type post versus a regular post. So there's plugins like that exist. New form elements that you might need. So there's a lot of plugins around the Gravity Forms community. So it's not just you're getting Gravity Forms. There's a lot of people that create extensions for it and kind of make it even better. I just didn't like Q all that much, so I kind of stuck with Gravity Forms. No. I mean, there's definitely worse plugins, form plugins out there. I mean, there's like hundreds of them, so really it's one of the better ones for sure. Any other questions? WordPress or anything? No? All right.
All right, so before we give away the noise canceling headphones, that work on an airplane that will literally cancel out any noise on an airplane. You'll feel like you're in heaven. Before we give those away, and the free copy of SG90 by Art Control, I wanted to do a quick demo of the plugin itself because it is a style guide plugin, and many of us that come to this meetup group are doing freelance work. We're consulting for clients. And as such, you have to give presentations to your clients. It's inevitable in that discovery phase or during the design phase of any client project you take on, there's going to be a moment where you have to communicate to your client your creative solution to their needs. And this plugin is awesome for achieving that goal. I'm basically going to be giving you the why and the how. Okay, why would we use a plugin like this? Because it makes your job faster in the presentation phase. It gives you a professional layout for your style guides consistently for every project you do. And it is something that is like really easy to scale up and scale down. It's built in sections, so you can easily move your sections around and you can delete and add sections, and I'll show you how that looks here in a moment. And then lastly, it keeps all of your style guides organized for all your different client projects. So you can always come back to them at different phases when you're working with different clients. So if you have a phase 2, you have this style guide already saved from before. If you need to add things or take things away, add more comps for additional sections. If you need to change the color scheme at any time, this keeps all of your style guides organized all in one place. You can use this as a versioning tool. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to demonstrate the style guide plugin. You can find this at artcontrol.com/products/SG-90. And this is the way the plugin works. Once you've downloaded the plugin, there are a couple of free extensions. One of the extensions is the SG60 to SG90 converter, which if you've already had our free plugin, you can convert all of those style guides over to the new style guide. And the second extension is a Google Fonts extension, which gives you access to all the Google fonts. And that will be integrated nicely into the SG90, and all of your style guides can work by using those fonts. So this is the way it works. Once you've installed SG90, you've installed your extensions, you'll have an SG90 tab that's added in your dashboard on the left-hand side. You'll click on SG90. Then you click on Create a new SG90 style guide. Right now I have a few style guides already created, but I'm going to create a new one right now. First thing you're going to see is a place to enter the title. Let's say I had a client called Tektronix, because that's going to be our demo for this example. I type in the title and I click Publish. The first thing you're going to see once it publishes the style guide is Add Style Guide section. And the way that the SG90 works is we've broken up our style guide into section categories. We have button box, color box, image box, text box, and once you add the extension, a Google Fonts box. And this is how easy it works. You type in the title. In this case, I want to add my first logo. And to add the logo, I'm going to select New Image Box. Once it adds that, you'll see it appear below. And here we have a few different choices. We can choose the radio box that says Showcase, which will add one large centered graphic. and then all of the subsequent images below that will be put into a 4-column layout underneath the main showcase graphic, or it can just be one graphic with no graphics underneath it if you don't add any more. You can select 4-column, which is just simply 4 columns, 4 graphics next to each other, and then the 2-column. You can also choose if you want to turn the modal off or on, and that's if you're uploading larger images. You can have it appear in a larger modal. In this case, I'm going to turn it off because the image is already going to be as large as it needs to be. So here we've got the media library. I scroll to where I've put my first logo image in the media library. I add it. There we've seen it added. Right there, if I want to add any more images, I can just click Add Image. In this case, I just want to leave that as is, and I'll click Update. So the first logo's been added. From here, let's say in my presentation, I wanted to have a logo, then I wanted to put text, then I wanted to put a couple more logos, and I wanted to add my color section after that. In this case, I would say I want to add a new text box to put my introduction text underneath the main logo. And there it is, it's just been added, which it just looks like any page or post. In this case, I'll put introduction. And for the formatting that I like to use, I'm going to center this. I'm going to add a little styling to the introduction by putting a header 2 on there. And then what you'll notice over on the right-hand side underneath the Publish box, another box appears called the Style Guide Order. And in that box, once I have 2 or more sections added, I can now reorder them over here on the right-hand side. So as I create more sections, I can keep creating sections as many as I want to. I can have 10 or 12 or 15 or 20, whatever it is. They'll appear over on the right-hand side, and all I have to do is drag and drop those sections, and then when I hit Update, I can change the order easily that way. The reason why this is of value to you in the way that you're designing and developing your style guides is because these things, if you're just designing a style guide in a plain page on your website, it can become quickly very unruly and difficult to work with. You're scrolling through a big long page with lots of comps and wireframe and flowchart, and it just gets kind of ridiculous. And who wants to keep adding a modal link to every single one of those graphics as you go down the page? This allows all that to get nicely organized so you can spin up your style guides quickly. They're easy to edit, easily to move sections around, and you can easily delete or add sections at any time. So to delete a section, I could just click Remove Section there. But in this case, let's say I wanted to add my color scheme. So I just go down here and I would say New Color Box after I've added the title. It adds it down here at the bottom. And now all I have to do is put my hex value in. Let's say I just want to add black. And you can call it whatever you want to. And then we'll go. And then we can just keep adding colors as we go down there. And what's nice about this is you can divide it up when you're working with your colors. You can add 3 colors as your primary, 3 colors. Then you can have secondary colors and create another category of as many colors as you want there, and then you can add another section. So it's nice that you can kind of separate sections out with text sections. So once we've created our style guide just the way we want it, we get all our sections in the right place, then all we do is we come back to the SG90, click on the SG90 tab, and it allows us to grab our short code from here, and then we can place it in a page. So I've already created the Tektronix LLC style guide, and we're just going to look. This is like that part where if we just like took the stuff, we just mixed the batter in the bowl, and now we're just like putting it in the oven. It's like a half an hour later. It comes out and it looks like this, right? Okay, so this is what this would look like. You can see we would, live on the internet, it would look like there's our logo at the top. Our introduction text appears below that. The next section I created was a 2-column image section to add 2 more logos. I added another text section for influences. Then I added a 4-column image section. And if I click on those, because I did turn on modal, you'll see this is the slider modal that you get. And then here's our color section, nicely laid out, very professional. So all you have to do is literally type in the hex and it'll bring up that color for you. And then you type in your RGB and your CMYK values. Down here, this is the way our fonts are laid out. Very minimalist, very elegant, straight to the point. And then here I just used a template from Creative Market to create that little print. You can kind of see how you can integrate really nicely each of those boxes to represent virtually anything you need to do to communicate all of your presentations to your clients. So, you know, once again, if you guys are looking for a really awesome plugin for creating your presentations for your clients, go to artcontrol.com/products/SG-90 and you will be able to check out our really awesome plugin. And that concludes my demonstration for this. What's that? Oh, right now, for a limited time, for like the next week or two, we are giving people 10% off. So if you don't win the plugin tonight with the headphones, then use this coupon code and you can get at least 10% off. And that code is launch10. So when you're in the checkout process, use launch10. And you will be able to get the plugin for 10% off. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to announce the winner of the noise-canceling Sony headphones that work great in, yes, an airplane. What? What was the question? They work awesome on airplanes. In fact, you feel like you're in heaven. What was your question? Yes. Did you RSVP to be here tonight? Then you are entered in the raffle. Yes. You are in. Yes. Okay, so I am going to bring up the page that will announce the winner right now. And the winner is, it randomly selects using the API from tonight's event. So Modem Looper, had he been here, he did RSVP to be here, by the way. So I will have words with Ryan next time I see him. Okay, so that's it. I'm sorry. No one's going to win now. No. Okay. So the winner of the headphones tonight is Vic. Is he here? No. Vic also will have words spoken to him. Yes, hold on a second. Oh. It is. It raises the suspense. Henry Poon. You did it! Oh, yay! Henry? Congratulations. And then you're going to see this guy over here for your code to get your free plugin.